We came in 1972. My husband arrived in June or July 1972, and my children and I came in September 1972. My husband came first because he wanted to explore the professional possibilities here. What sort of jobs, though he's a doctor, he wasn't sure how he was going to establish himself here, so he thought he'd come alone. You see, we debated this at home, that's in Sri Lanka, for a long time. The main reason why we decided to leave the country was professionally we were, very, very financially and professionally we were very comfortably off. There was nothing wanting. My daughter was a baby, but the other two boys were in school. My husband was a specialist in charge of a specialist physician in charge of a big hospital, and I had a job teaching in a school that I really loved. I loved teaching those kids, and and it's a school where I studied till the HSC, and I went back to work there, and it was a place I truly loved. And it was really heartbreaking for me to leave that job and leave that working environment. But the reason why we decided to leave the country was because of the racial problems that were building up. So we as minority Tamils were being discriminated against in various ways. Our generation, we had survived, because before things got too bad. My husband realized, there's what's the point of our being comfortable when our children have no future. So we have to make sacrifices. So he hated to give up his job and I hated to give up my job, and our parents were there and the family, relatives everywhere, all of them were dead against us leaving the country. So, but however, my husband said no, he has to. I fought it in the last minute, coming here, and without telling me, he sent in his resignation, to the hospital and said he was resigning. And even before he had applied to the Australian High Commission, and they had asked him to come for an interview, and I didn't know anything about this. And only after he resigned, he rang, and he was in another town. He rang and told me, I've resigned. And so I just didn't know how to react. It was really, I knew it was some decision we had to make. But it was like, the feeling that we want to postpone making the decision. So finally I said, okay, I didn't know even the history, the geography we knew, what I had learnt in school as a kid, about the Murray-Darling River and about Sydney and Melbourne and Canberra. That's about we knew. And about Uluru, of course it wasn't called Uluru at the time, Ayers Rock. And so he said, but we knew one couple, old schoolmate of mine and her husband had migrated the previous year, 71. So I wrote to her and she said, oh, I know there are very few, those days we used to say Ceylonese, we never said Sri Lanka. So we used to, very few Ceylonese or Indians here, but, it's a nice place, people are friendly and things like that, don't, worry about coming if you want to come. So we took that as a, as a piece of encouragement. Oh, I shed a lot of tears, leaving home, especially my mother was so distraught, my father was upset too, but he's not a person who will ever show emotion. But my mother was very upset. We brought a lot of things, but they came by ship. My mother sent packing cases full of spices and everything ranging from chili powder to whole chilies, dried chilies and coriander and all sorts of spices. And rice, even the rice came from there, rice flour, atta flour, you mentioned it, everything was packed, and mustard seed, even mustard seeds came. Of the many saris I brought from home, one thing I couldn't leave behind was the wedding sari, which I wore because as everybody knows, people are very, superstitious about, keeping it safe and things like that. So I brought the wedding, there were 2 wedding saris and I brought both of them. 3 small children in a new place, and my 2 boys were getting used to, school. And and this is, mind you, the eastern suburbs, Bellevue Hill, not an Indian child in sight, or even a Chinese for that matter, no Asian children. And my two kids were probably the first, non-white kids, to go to that school. And I was terribly worried, really worried whether they'll be subjected to racist remarks and, things like that. They never came home and complained at all. So I don't know whether anything went on or not. I'm sure it did. I'm sure, knowing what kids are like, I'm sure it did. But there was no major complaint. But the teachers liked them a lot, because they were so well behaved, and did their work, did their homework. So the teachers loved them. They always told me, oh, he's such a good student. But I remember the first day when they were admitted, when I took them to school, the headmistress said, no, it's okay, you can go, Mrs. Bala, I'll take them to the classroom. I couldn't go. I just stood there and I nearly broke down in tears, because, I had this feeling, my God, and I looked at all the faces and I thought, my children look so different, and I thought, God, how are they going to cope? At the time we arrived in 1972, we knew only about 5 or 6 families. And they were all spread out. They were not in one area. We were in the eastern suburbs and we were the only ones. I was so homesick and I wanted to, meet people, who came from my country. And on weekends, we used to drive from Bondi. We used to pile the 3 kids in the car, and we used to drive from Bondi to Camden, and just to have a chat, to talk, just to socialize. I feel I've changed dramatically, because lots of things I do here, I may not have been, I'm not sure, I may not have been allowed to do back in Sri Lanka. Here I can speak my mind, I can, I've done radio programs, on Tamil program on SBS radio for 15 years. I probably wouldn't have got a chance, back home. That's one thing. And the other thing, whether it's political affairs or whatever, you got more freedom to, speak your mind here. Now, I would probably say Sydney is home, but in a little corner of my heart, it still says, Jaffna, where I was born, Sri Lanka.